This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
I think I'm going to start the question session by putting a question myself to the libraries here present. What about electronic resources? Because I think we're heavily concentrating now on printed material. But as we know, like it's more often that a publication only comes in a format, electronic format, than a printed one. It might be a web page, might be even a PDF document, or any other kind of ebook format that is available for a publication. So, do you have in your libraries policies for acquisition of ebooks, for example? And if you do have such a service, how do you do this acquisition? By subscription or buying the electronic copy and keep it in a kind of in restricted time in your libraries?
I'll just start off by saying that in Oxford we do buy ebooks, but it tends to be mainly through quite major established platforms and suppliers. So if you're talking about slightly more independent kind of published ebooks, we do struggle there, and I think in fact it is a policy that we don't catalogue free ebooks, which is quite a challenge. It's something that I would say a lot of librarians would like to be able to do. But I think there's resistance because potentially the number of free ebooks could be so great that the additional burden on cataloguing teams to catalogue all those free ebooks that librarians would then be requesting to be put onto catalogues would just be far too much. So I wonder whether that will start to shift as more books are available in electronic format, and perhaps the pressure would grow. There'll be some kind of shift in the cataloguing practices. But I say currently it's not something that we're able to do. So if we find free ebooks that we think are really useful, we just have to try by other means to really publicise them. So either by putting them on our own kind of subject guides that we often have online, or on the website where we might have a subject page with resources. I have to say with things like databases or web pages, it's much easier because we have a platform for those that we can add to much more easily at Oxford. So we have a kind of platform for all of our e-resources. They can be arranged by subject, and you can give descriptions of what they are. And if I find free kind of databases or interesting blogs and things, then I can add them to those kind of platforms. But I think for kind of free ebooks, that might be in a PDF format or something like that, then it is quite challenging.
I can go now. It's a bit of a challenge at Cambridge. There's not a policy as such for buying ebooks. I know our colleagues in English are buying consistently in English. In Spanish, we've just subscribed to a database of e-content for Spain and Latin America and books. And it seems to be working all right, but we're just waiting for feedback because although ebooks are not new, at Cambridge in particular, it hasn't taken off really. I see a regular number of users visiting the database, for instance, but I'm now trying to gather everybody's thoughts to see whether people are really, really preferring the print form or the electronic form. We have been offered books in PDF format as opposed to the book in print, but our IT department doesn't deal with this very well. There's a lot of work behind it. It's not just accepting it; it's putting it into the system, cataloging it. So there's not a policy for that either. So for the moment, we're going for the print book. And once you've subscribed, we have subscribed to a database, you can also buy books in perpetuity based on demand. If you see that an area is particularly very heavily used, for instance, then you might consider buying this material at a reduced rate while you're subscribing. But it's still very early days, I think. But we're getting there slowly.
Okay, shall I go? The British Library has a number of problems to overcome in this area. One is that we are a lot of IT resource is going into making available legal deposit material in electronic format. So therefore purchased takes a second place, and foreign purchased e-format takes an even further place backwards. The other problem, and this is common to both material in English, material UK material, or foreign material, is that we don't have, as it were, so clearly subscribed. No, what's the word I'm after? Circumscribed readership. Anyone within reason can have a reader's ticket. Anyone can be a reader of the British Library. So this creates great problems for licensing, because we have we don't have a defined clientele of readership. The other problem, because I do have colleagues in acquisitions who are very keen to subscribe to the database that Sonia mentioned, called Digitalia, but readers in Cambridge can access this from their, if they have a university readers team, from their office, from wherever. And they can do it 24/7, 365 days a year. We can't do that, not at the moment. So we do have very real problems there. We would like to have a go with Digitalia, but it would be very much a pilot, and it does have risks, because Sonia's level of hits, and we have spoken about this, was surprisingly high, and I would be afraid in the British Library that ours would be low, and then they would say, well, no one wants foreign material, no one wants Latin American material, no one's reading it. Well, there are very good reasons for that, but you've got to convince the accountants that those reasons are valid. At the moment, we do have a colleague in Arts and Humanities who is actually looking into a policy which takes a much more long-term view and doesn't just look at how many hits in any one year, in any one month, and working out that it costs £100 per hit, because that is a very, very short-term view. So that's the particular problem with the British Library has in that area.
For Senate House, we will buy e-books. I've noticed, particularly with literature, that people can be resistant to actually reading something online. They prefer the paper copy. So if you had, say, a short item on Cuban poetry, maybe 100 pages long, people will manage. If you get something really long, like 400 pages, then they'll be asking us, yes, we know you've got the electronic, but please, 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 can you get the paper copy for us as well? So we've got to bear that in mind. It doesn't matter what format something's in so much. PDFs, yes, I've been sent PDFs of books, but you have to be really careful that you're not infringing copyright in any shape or form. There's a lot of e-material out there, and there are web pages that say, oh, you can download this book, that book, and you take a closer look and you say to the person, sorry, we just can't do that because we think it's been pirated. So that is a problem sometimes. For actually putting something on the catalogue, you can put anything on a catalogue. A colleague once had to catalogue a tinfoil skeleton as part of a Day of the Dead item. So we can do an awful lot, but there are stages that we just can't go beyond. So if somebody sees this nice tasty book that's out there and it's an e-version and it's a dubious site, we can't really do anything about it.
So I think probably we'll open out to questions from the audience. Barry.
Can I ask those who make e-books available, do you make them available on Kindle?
They can download onto the computer screens. Sometimes it depends what license you've got. You have to have a multi-user license and something compatible to download it to. And I.
Back in my mind, I suspect that the reason people don't like reading books electronically is that it might sit on a chair at a desk rather than should be answered.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that problem is that they want to be able to take something away with them.
Exactly.
We do have some platforms that you can download the ebook onto your own device, but there are others that will only allow a kind of on-screen download, and sometimes it's very restrictive. You can't print many pages, if any at all, or perhaps you could download a chapter and not the whole thing. So there are some quite restrictive licenses that some suppliers do put onto these products, or publishers put onto the product. So I think that, I mean, I agree with Christine. I think there is often resistance, particularly I think for students that are really studying a text very in depth. And I don't know whether if they feel like it helps that they have something kind of to hold and to see that kind of connects them more with what they're reading. So I think that's something as well. And we find that students of literature are more resistant to ebooks, whereas for some reason students of linguistics are actually a lot more receptive. And I don't know whether that's because it's less common for them to read a book from start to finish, and they might be dipping into chapters of larger books, or whether it's something that will just change over time. So
Some people find if they're comparing different editions of books and where the text might vary slightly, they prefer to have the hard copy because they can have one here and one there and just flick through. Where if you're working on a screen, you're constantly pulling down one version, putting it in a corner, bringing another one up to look at it. So you need the 2 or 3 together in front of you to be able to do anything worthwhile with them.
one thing that we are trialling shortly in Oxford is actually having tablets available in reading rooms for students to use. So they can have perhaps a book or their notes on their laptop, and then a kind of library tablet that they'll be able to use to access electronic resources. So and they can have another book open on their desk. So kind of allowing a bit more flexibility for using electronic books or other electronic resources is to be able to have those different devices and kind of lay them out in a slightly more flexible way. So it's something that we're trying to facilitate the use of these kind of things, but it's something that I guess that we'll have to monitor and see kind of what the uptake is of these kind of devices.
Joanne?
Just going back probably to printed books, I wondered how much numbers, kind of usage numbers, influences your decisions about what to buy. Because I mean, I had this experience very, very often of being the first person ever to take a book out of my university library, and I'm so grateful and that someone had the foresight 20 years ago or whatever it was to buy it. And I would hate to think that if I hadn't taken that book out, then some decision might be made that, well, that author is no longer worth collecting. Or how much does it influence your decision?
I wouldn't say that usage influences purchasing decisions as much.
Are you talking about electronic or
No,
print?
print.
Print.
I would say for print, often we would not just rely on whether someone was using the book. I think we would take a slightly longer view of the author and kind of do a bit more research about them. I would say generally once an author is kind of in the collection, you don't tend to stop buying them. You continue to buy them. When it comes to new authors, then we would kind of read around a lot and kind of read criticism and talk to the faculty and see what they thought about them if we were kind of going to start purchasing somebody new. I would say that usage comes into it a bit more when maybe we decide in Oxford anyway, what we might have on open shelves. So kind of in reading rooms and freely accessible for people to take off the shelves. Whereas things that maybe authors that are not really used, we might send them to a kind of off-site store, but they're still available, being requested kind of the next day. So it's something that we would choose what kind of material to place in different locations, but I don't think we would base a purchasing decision solely on kind of usage like that, because we expect in a research collection to have about 80% of the stock really low, very, very low use, practically no use. I think that's just the way that research libraries are kind of made up. I think.
We do elaborate on requests, and sometimes we try to assess the area of that particular book and then expand, not just concentrate on that particular author or that particular book. We try and elaborate from that, but we don't have usage statistics. I mean, we don't get lists of the most borrowed books, for instance. I've had it once in, 10, 15 years. So no, we couldn't work from that. something I do very much is like looking at what, in particular, people in Cambridge, what they are studying, what their profile is, what are they researching, what have they just published, and based on that you start expanding. Because we do have to concentrate on what our readers are doing, you know, what research they're working on, because we have a budget for that university, which is trying to be as comprehensive as possible, but yeah.
Just to say there that, I mean, I know that our colleague at the University of Essex was always fighting a losing battle against people who against library management. They sort of said, oh, this book hasn't been used for the last 3 years, it needs to go to the outhouse. And then, of course, then there was immediate stink, and academics said, no, we need it on site. I don't want to wait 24 hours for it to arrive. But there is a sort of dichotomy here, because certainly our management does look, and this goes back to the electronic, does look at the usage of electronic subscriptions. And that is why this colleague, the recently appointed colleague, is looking at getting over this in terms of digital, of subscriptions of digital monographs. You've actually got to look long term, which, as Joanne said, we don't necessarily expect a new book to be used 5 times in its first year, but it will be there when it's someone's research 5 years down the line. The book is there. The number of people who at conferences come to me and say, "Gosh, I was looking for this book, you know." And found in the British Library. Why was it bought? Well, someone again had the foresight to buy it whenever in the past. But there is this dichotomy about electronic subscriptions and usage of print material that is the way library managements look at them, and we've got to overcome that if we're going to go anyway, I think, down the electronic route.
Major Holdings Library won't withdraw items that haven't been used for a long time. We might relegate them, say, to the tower or to an off-site store or something. But we wouldn't necessarily withdraw them. Something that isn't flavour of the month now, in about 5-10 years' time, might be something that everybody's interested in. And we find here that our students and staff might not be using particular authors, but suddenly we'll get interlibrary loan requests from the other end of the country, and they're requesting that we send them everything we've got by a particular author. So it pays to pay a waiting game, I think. I think with the University of Essex, if they have a lot of hits on an ebook, that they then buy the hard copy, whereas other libraries will do the opposite.
I studied for many years in Cambridge and am now really missing the UL. Now I'm in the University of Surrey. I think Latin American connection really used a lot in this side. The School of English and Languages had its budget slashed last year from 55 grand to 15 grand.
Oh my God.
I was wondering if this was
We are suffering it as well,
right.
Definitely. I mean, not so drastically. Actually, this year we have the same budget as last year, I believe, more or less the same. But last year it went down from what we had before. So we are all experiencing this, some institutions more than others. So yeah, it's a recurrent problem. I hope that in a few years' time, when things improve, it will go back to what it was, or a better situation. But at the moment,
and the other thing I've noticed is that Surrey is very keen on eBooks.
Right.
About half the stuff I have
Yeah.
Yeah. I think is that one of the reasons for that they're cheaper.
they're not necessarily cheaper. No, not they are not. I mean, at the moment, with the database we've got, if we wanted to buy anything, any book in perpetuity, it would be $35, and many of those books cost much less than that. But I mean, you are acquiring the rights to it. But then you have to add cataloging time, and you have to add many other things. I mean, they come with records, but sometimes you have to modify it. You have to import the records into your system. That's personnel time as well. So they come at a cost. They're not necessarily cheaper. Would you say
they're not necessarily cheaper. I think.
You save on storage.
I would say space.
Storage, yes.
Space
Brilliant.
is a big issue in libraries, so I think storage space.
But then there's electronic storage, and that
Yeah.
costs, and they have to be maintained and refreshed and various other things.
Yes.
I mean,
So-
there is one argument for ebooks sometimes in that if you need something very urgently and it's available as an ebook, with most of the platforms we have, if you make the purchase, the book is then instantly available to your readers. So if it's something that has been requested because it's, you suddenly get an email saying, oh, I've put this on my reading list and it's not in the library, and you think, well, you need to send me your list a little bit more in advance. If it's available as an ebook, then you can purchase it straight away, and you've effectively solved that problem. Also, with ebooks, you can often have multiple users using the book at the same time. So if you're going to buy maybe 1 or 2 print copies, okay, that's maybe a couple of students in the class that can get the book at once. Whereas, you might have 10 students all trying to write the same essay in 1 week. If they can all access the ebook concurrently, then that's a great advantage. So there are pros and cons.
I think there's one question. Sorry.
Just thinking there might be other reasons why people will buy ebooks. If you've got a loan and a reference copy of a particular thing, and each costs £70, you might as well buy an ebook multi-user license for 150, which sounds quite a lot. The reason being that if things are in demand and we get users from all over the colleges, we find that certain things go walkabout. People stash them, they act like squirrels and don't put them back when they've finished. So basically you'd be constantly replacing or trying to replace the pages that people have ripped out, because that's the bit they're doing at that moment in time. So with an ebook, multi-user license, it can't be stolen, it can't be shelved, it can't be hidden.
Also, it can't be written on.
And it can't be, they can make their own notes, but nothing, they've not found a way to do anything else with it yet. So that might be one reason why.
Going back to print books, you all spoke about working primarily with dealers. I was thinking, if you sent you an email or saw you or something and said, there are these amazing Venezuelan books on Amazon, would you be able to buy them, or do you have to go through dealers?
We have quite a lot of flexibility. The primary aim is to be able to get the material. If we can get them through a supplier that we already have kind of good agreements with, we try to do that, because normally we've negotiated a discount with them. We know they have reliable shipping and we have good relations, so we try to kind of focus our purchasing with them. But if they're not available elsewhere, then we do. I mean, in Oxford we do have facility to buy things from Amazon. We buy secondhand from eBooks a lot to kind of replace missing stock. We also, if we have to buy something individually, it's maybe independently published, it's only really available from the person publishing it, then we try and find a way to buy it in those circumstances as well. So I think the aim is really to try and get the material for our users, and not just to kind of try and stick with the contracts we've got. So.
We try very much, but sometimes it's not possible, I have to say, because the university dictates whom they're receiving money from, whom we're dealing with. And it's very difficult to buy from Amazon for us, because we don't use credit cards. We do it all through via checks or electronic transfer. The university does the payment. We don't see money. I never see money. So no, it's true. I have lots of money, but I don't see it. So, we are very limited sometimes, because they say no. Amazon is a no-no, unfortunately, because sometimes it's really annoying. They come to you, you see it on the Amazon page, it's just maybe €9 or $9, and you think, and I cannot get it through any other mean. Yeah, it's very frustrating. Some of us have more flexibility than others, it depends.
Yeah, I mean, we will buy out of print material, hard to get material from wherever, and we do have the benefit of a corporate card, which enables us to do that. In fact, the library has moved on a bit, because in the past it wasn't possible for you to use the card in a shop in Spain and then, as it were, reclaim the money from the library. You have to go and find a tame dealer who would sort of do the transaction for you. But you can now buy, for instance, an art cap. I'll be in Madrid on Monday, and I know that I'm going to have to go to a particular exhibition because they have a catalogue which has not been distributed, and I shall wave my corporate card in front of them, and they will be suitably impressed, and I'll walk out with it. Yeah, you can buy one-offs, but otherwise it's, as my colleagues say, we are bound by these contracts for the bulk of material.
The other software with one-offs, of course, is purchase and package.
Yes, yes.
Because the book might be $9
Yes.
first time you return.
Yes, you would spend a lot on the eBay Libro
Yes.
for postage.
Yeah, I mean, we're tied into various contracts, and most of the ordering is done through Coutts, which is fine for English language material. So they might say to you, oh yes, we can get this Spanish item. Think, no, you can't. And they usually tell you that they can't do it about a month before the budget goes west. So we have argued for a special dispensation. So for foreign language material, we can order via Amazon and ABE books. I've ordered from bookshops in the Caribbean and various places in the States and Latin America and across Europe as well, for this particular sort of material, because of the difficulties of acquiring it in a timely fashion. Yes, that's okayed. The payment goes through on a credit card. I'd make a request to the head of procurement and say, look, I want this, this and this from Amazon, from here, there and everywhere. And they say, fine, and they order on the credit card.
I think Emma raised it.
I was just going to say that although eBooks on the face of it don't look particularly cheap, if you want to buy multiplication for multiple
Yes, yes.
you already answered that.
Yes. We don't on my library, we just buy one single copy, but faculty libraries would, and maybe you do at Oxford.
Yeah, well, we tend
In that. Yeah, definitely.
Jordana?
Yeah, just two other questions. One is obviously to update the archive or the collection of the library fee, rely on students and in general. So is there, and then you have a good collection of the dissertations, for example. So do you I don't know, read the bibliographical works or the works cited in the dissertations, or there is a way to train? So do you use the dissertations in any way?
I don't, I'm sorry. I do not have the time. I wish, but I do try and identify what people I know are writing. I cannot follow every single postgraduate student. We not only rely on the suppliers we were talking about, we also read reviews and
also looking at
newspapers.
Kind of conference topics.
Oh yes,
you know,
that's very
that's
important.
A really good source
Conference
of
topics, yes.
newer kind of trends, especially
Exactly.
postgraduate conferences.
Yes, I mean maybe from now on I could keep an eye, but
obviously
it is.
Time approach you, but
Yes, but I would. I mean,
It's a good idea. I know.
yes, but I generally keep track of what postgraduate students are doing in Cambridge. So by the time they've published their PhD, I'm not going to read it. I'm really sorry. I don't have the time. But I know what they are working on, and the interesting thing for me is not the end result. Is the area they're working on. What are they setting a trend? Are they working on something really interesting that we are not really focusing on and we should be focusing on? So by the time the PhD is released, I think we should, ideally, and if we haven't, please do come back to us and say, hey, what about my PhD?
The other question was about the potential if you have collaborative projects with because I'm just thinking I studied in Buenos Aires, right, digital a long time, and obviously libraries, they are a part of general literature, with students of literature rely on their own personal
Yes.
More kind of second-hand shops, and libraries are very much, I mean, it's very difficult to get both in national libraries.
Yes.
Although there are now, in Buenos Aires in particular, a lot of work in the National Library and being done. And when I went to Cambridge to do the PhD, I felt very privileged, really, and I found a lot of archival books that are not available in Argentina. And I was very sad in a way, because as Sonia said, she found out this book that no one hears this. Probably a lot of people outside. I know that assistants and libraries have a budget, and they are very important to universities as well. So it's difficult to think of a project that could bring together, Latin American libraries with British libraries in a way. But I'm thinking if there is important collaboration.
Well, I'm sure there is ways. We are not collaborating with anyone at the moment, but I mean there is this exchange programs. For instance, I've been approached quite frequently by other universities in Latin America saying, "Let's exchange publications," and I can't exchange anything because nothing is for free. I'm buying every book, but because they associate Cambridge University Press with Cambridge University. So these exchange programs are working in many other institutions where they have their own publications.
I have to say we did used to have some exchange partners. Oxford University Press did kind of do lots of exchanges.
Yes.
But it's something that our acquisitions teams have really scaled down in recent years because they found that it was very labour intensive, and often it wasn't a very effective way of getting publications, and they started to find that actually it was better to purchase them than to do an exchange. So I know that there are some areas that have found that it's still worthwhile to do exchanges, particularly East European publications. They found it still very beneficial because you just can't buy the publications. There seems to be some kind of difficulty in kind of purchasing, but they can do exchanges with the university. But I would have to say, we found anyway, for the ones we had with, I think with Mexico, definitely that it just wasn't worth having the exchange anymore.
Yes. And the logistics are difficult as well. We are very far away. If you are working on a project together, you have to see each other quite frequently. Or, well, you could rely on Skype or any other media, or video conferencing and all that. But and then there is, the means of you have to find that a university that matches yours somehow. Sometimes. And it's not just you alone, it's your institution behind you and what they allow you to do or what they would, support you with. So it would be beautiful to work on all this. I mean, I'm not traveling so much anymore, but I've been traveling a lot to the States and Latin America, and Joanne has as well. And we are in touch with many librarians there and non-librarians, academics as well. And by email, we do keep in touch.
Yeah,
and
I think we try and build a kind of a good network. It's something that we're kind of constantly trying. As Sonia said, we have good contacts in the United States, and then often through them, the kind of good contacts in Latin America, either kind of students or within libraries. But it's not something that has, for us, come into a kind of tangible project as yet.
The British Library used to have huge numbers of exchange agreements, which were generally for official publications. But during the Thatcher period, we used HMSO publications for exchange. We got those free. Then they'd start HMSO charged for them, so all the exchanges immediately became totally uneconomic. So at present in the British Library, we only have the only exchange I have is with the Spanish National Library, and it's largely of exhibition catalogues based on exhibitions in Madrid, and I send British Museum and British Library exhibition catalogues and publications. It's very, very restricted for the reasons my colleagues have said.
Yeah, we get some exchanges. What is particularly useful sometimes are donations from people who've, say, just finished a PhD. I got a nice job lot of very recent Colombian women's literature from somebody who'd just finished a PhD. And it was stuff that I couldn't buy now because it was totally out of print. So I had these 40, 50 books and promise of more to come. So that can be really useful as well as a donation.
That is an important point, which just, in case we're running out of time, I want to go back to. I think I did a survey some years ago about special collections in Hispanic special collections in the UK libraries. These were generally built up on the basis of collaboration between academics and library. You think of Wilson in Cambridge, I mean, okay, with material from the 19th century. And Pring Mill in Oxford, and this is vitally important. So, okay, well, I mean, obviously, if the academic is working on material, he's not going to hand it over. He or she is not going to hand it over to the university library immediately, or hopefully might leave it in their will. But the point about collaboration and building collections, it requires then collaboration at an early stage. I mean, this struck me about in Ed King's interesting talk, that really and truly, it wouldn't happen in the British Library because we don't work that closely with users. But in a university library, there ought to be a mechanism of saying, I'm going to do this, that and the other, and then the library might be able to decides to divert money into buying that material, and it will then end up having a collection which is unique and in the country, and other people will come and use it. And that is something which should be encouraged, because you know, that material, no one else is going to want to go out and spend money on it, because it will have such limited usage. Then we do need to build up those special collections. And indeed, with the British Library, just like Christine, has had gifts from people who have done the research and suddenly discovered all these texts that they were no longer going to read again, either because they were doing a move to a different area or they hadn't got an academic job. And this can be very, very useful.
Okay, I think we do one more. Yeah, fine.
Kind of linked to the last question. I just wanted to know about there's not with UK. I mean, these talk much to each other and how to collaborate with how much. So they use the in the UK.
Yeah, a lot. Yes.
In fact, we have a group called ACLAIIR, which is we are organizing this conference, and then we well, we are the main representatives of ACLAIIR, but what we try to do really is to coordinate the work between libraries, archives, and academic research, academics and research institutes as well, in order to map out what kind of materials we need to provide and what kind of support we have to provide in this community.
But I mean, there have been lots of talk about what's it called, distributive collection, collecting, but it's never really got off the ground. I can badmouth him. It's no longer in post, but there was a librarian, not a Hispanist, the librarian at the University of Essex, who didn't want to collaborate with anybody. They wanted, and his was extreme. But there was a tendency, I would say, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I joined the British Library, that no one wanted to collaborate with anybody. We have our users, we serve our users, you serve your users, and we're not buying books for anyone else to use. And that it's taken a long time, and it's to overcome that. And though it might happen, there are lots and lots of problems. I mean, what happens when someone stops buying Guatemalan literature? You know, academic A moves away, and they're no longer buying books on, I don't know, poverty in Puerto Rico. Then the collection stops, and then is someone else going to take it up? There are lots of problems with it. There are people who are more open to it, not so insular. There are a lot of issues. We talk a lot. Yeah. We do an awful lot of talking, but maybe from our positions in our institutions, we don't have an enormous amount of leverage.
I think there are issues because obviously we do first and foremost have to serve our users, and for university libraries we have a defined readership and we want to serve them kind of first of all, and with budgets shrinking it is a bit of a challenge. Yes. And I think here we haven't really gone into kind of collaborative collecting as much as they have in the States, where in some cases, actually between universities, they might divide up a country like Mexico and say, you buy the north, we'll buy the south. And they're very kind of strict about that. The difference they have is the way they manage their kind of interlibrary loan system. They obviously have a lot more resource to fund it, because they often have free interlibrary loan and kind of very free circulation of material between institutions. And I think just because of the way, firstly, our kind of transport networks and our funding resources, the way that they're allocated, is something that we would really struggle with to kind of to copy that model. But I think there's definitely more scope, I think, for us to look into greater collaboration. I think it would have to work in a slightly different way, but as Geoff said, we do all communicate a lot about what we're doing and kind of what we're buying and our strengths.
And we have considered purchasing collections collaboratively when the amount of money you have to spend is so big that it would take your whole budget. We have considered it. We haven't done it yet.
But I think it's something that will...
It's in the pipeline, I think.
If you've got any sort of collaborative collection development, I think you'd have to draw up some sort of contract for a minimum amount of time. So you do this and you do that. Okay, one of us might deviate from time to time depending on our particular user base. You could do that, but you're going to have a contract and something like the library equivalent of a prenup. So you can't turn around and say, we're not teaching this anymore, we're going to get rid of all this material. There should be an agreement that the other institution takes on that material. And if you've got, say, 2 collaborators or 3, it doesn't matter. The main issue is access. It's no point these 3 separate libraries dividing up the material between them if they haven't got reciprocal access for their 3 user bases. I mean, we do have interlibrary loan. That goes to a certain way. It can be expensive if people have to pay for it. But really, they ought to be allowed in to borrow if you set up any such arrangement, to be completely fair to them.
I think that would cause quite a lot of reaction.